It feels sort of weird to be starting this because I know that it's one of the last ones I'll ever make, but um, I definitely thought that I would want to talk a little about what I've learned throughout the course and um, everything that I've taken away from it. So this first video is basically just going to be about some of my thoughts about the strategies we've talked about, and also about like the IEP process too. So just a few different opinions I had on those things. So I wrote notes in my book, so if you hear me flipping, that's why. Well, first I wanted to talk about the disability presentations and what I thought about those. I really liked that option because I thought it was really good to be able to take your knowledge and then try to look outside the text and then make something that you could share with other people. I think I always go by the policy, well, from the retention rate pyramid, that doing something always helps you remember, and I really feel like that that project is good because it has us not only just reading information about a specific category of disability, it's actually having us use that information and make something. So I think that that was really great, and I also liked that we had to critique each one. After a while, it would get a little hard to critique them. If you, well, I think I have a specifically hard time criticizing anything. I think people say I'm too nice about things, but I tried my best to give some constructive feedback, but that got a little hard sometimes. But overall, I think that the critiques were also good because it showed us what we could have done better, so it was still a learning experience, not we just did it and then got it out of the way. So I really like those. I also like that a lot of people, I didn't think to do this in mind, but they put questions at the end of their video for you to take away to think about, and a lot of them asked really interesting questions, not like generic ones. So I thought that people did a really good job with trying to make you think about their category of disability even after watching it, which is sometimes hard to do because sometimes it's just, oh, I watched it, now it's done. But leaving an effect is really important, I think, for that. And I also think it was a good way to cover, I think the Pecha Kucha format was a good way to cover a lot of information in a small amount of time, because we all know that in grad school our attention spans have dwindled down, and sometimes the chapters could be so much information and so lengthy that it would just get sometimes hard to focus. But that kind of format, especially with the voiceover and the pictures and not big blocks of text like a PowerPoint might be, I think was really good because it helped you focus on the main importance of each of the categories. And I also like that there were teaching strategies involved, because I think that that's the point of these chapters. It's not just to learn about what exactly are these disabilities, but what are things we can do to help people who have specific things. I think that that's important. That's something that I think I've learned throughout this class. Was I sort of looked at inclusion and having students with disabilities as making generic types of changes and saying no matter what their disability was, maybe doing the same things, which I sort of cringe at now because I know how wrong that is, and how you have to, everything's individual circumstance, and you have to take not even just the students with disabilities, but every single person's individual circumstances into account when teaching. So it does make me cringe, and I think that I thought that I could just have a couple things and use them for everybody. So, But I think that's something that the disability presentations um, made me realize with all the teaching strategies for specific things. Okay, I also wanted to talk about, I talked about it a little in the Prezi, but I have to say, I think one of the most interesting topics to me in the class was PBIS, or behavioral management, just because it's something I have been sort of worried about. I think that in the classroom, I realized that my demeanor is a little bit more quiet, and I have a hard time putting students in their place sometimes when they, need to quiet down or need to stop talking or pay attention. It's just something that I've noticed I've struggled with. And even in undergrad, I would look up stuff on my own to try and see what some methods I could use to manage behavior. And it was hard. It was really hard to find good resources when looking on my own, and good ideas to try. And I haven't been able to try these ones we've learned in class. A little bit in the co-teaching lesson, but not on a lengthy scale. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Some of these methods I'm looking forward to try out. But I really think that was so interesting to me, was because it was something I've been wondering about how to handle. But I think that the book gives you some really good strategies, and we've talked about it a lot. So that's something that I really thought. Another thing that, let me get a find the page I wrote my notes on. Okay. Another thing I really liked learning about was UDL. At the beginning, or not the beginning, but earlier in the course, I don't think I really had a good definition of it. I think I sort of just presumed what the definition was, and that's a big no-no. And then after really learning about it, I think that this is something that is super important to me, especially because I think that although it can be implemented for the whole class, it is something I think that really helps students with disabilities. Basically, between the multiple means of representation, the multiple means of engagement, and the multiple means of expression, between the three, we basically can learn to alter any part of our lesson to be more in line with what each student needs. Especially, I think students with disabilities, if they come into a classroom and they know they won't be boxed in to having to do things a specific way, and it's also, speaking of that, I know it's the least obtrusive means. It's not supposed to, you're not just supposed to say, oh, this is way too hard, or oh, they can't do that, let's change it completely. I think that UDL makes it known that there are options, and you can change the way you represent things, the way you have activities or engagement, or the way you assess students or have them do hand-in things. But I think it is important to note that it's not, sometimes you have to remember to only change things slightly as much as they need. How I like to plan and incorporate, how I incorporate in my lessons, or how I think I'll incorporate in my future classes, giving people a few choices. I'm always a big fan of choice. I think sometimes if you give too many choices, it can be overwhelming, especially for grading purposes. But I think that when students have multiple ways of engaging in the class, and they know that it's not always going to be set up for them, that they can have some free will, I think that's great. And I also think that multimodality and using a variety of resources is always good, especially in the English classroom, because we're talking about different ways to think about things and learn things. So it just seems like a natural extension of that to me. Especially, I think for students with disabilities, I think that every student has strengths and weaknesses, and I think students with disabilities also have those strengths and weaknesses, and I think that UDL using UDL and implementing it in your own types of ways can be really, really good. I actually think also I showed the resources in the Prezi a little that I took away. I talked about the reference ones, and I put the link, but all of those ones where it talked about different types of things you can do and make things from that main website, I think that was a really, really good resource, because I opened up a ton of tabs and saw like all of the thing, and I bookmarked a lot of them so I can use them in the future. But like those are really cool, because it shows how not only are you asking your students to represent, engage, and express in multiple ways, but you are also doing it too. So you do it sort of together, which I think is really important. That it's not just a one-sided, that this UDL is sort of how you do things and how they do things. I also like that it talks about the inherent flexibility, making lessons with some flexibility already. So it's not a process where you're going and changing things. It's more of you're prepared, and you allow for things for things to be done differently. So those are some of my thoughts about UDL. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about the IEP and the special ed process. So that was something I didn't know anything about, and that's why I knew this class would be really important for me to take, because I knew nothing, like absolutely nothing. And I knew that inclusion was what was happening now, so I did know that, but besides that I didn't know anything else. And inclusion wasn't even when I was in high school. There were some inclusive, but it was still sort of half inclusion, half pull-out method. It was like a weird transition period, I feel like. And perhaps I don't know enough to know what was really happening, but that's what it seemed like from the outsider's perspective. So, but yeah, so coming into this class, I really thought, that this was going to be really like, maybe, I don't know, I guess I thought that it would be pretty, general, and I thought like it would be like a process that, that I would be able to catch on to real fast and understand how it worked, and what you'd have to do, and different things. But I realized really fast, especially when I got the textbook, just lifting it up, I'm like, oh, I don't think this is as general as I thought. And then while reading, I realized how specific it really is, and how many steps there are in the process, and especially with making IEPs, or learning about 504s. I knew nothing about. I didn't even know 504 was a thing. So I really learned a ton, and I know that these chapters and are something that I'll definitely go back to in the future, or because it's really hard to memorize everything in them, and but especially it's been a few months since I looked at him, and my mind's already fuzzy on a lot of the stuff in the process. So I know that it's something I'm going to have to reconsult and even look up and re-educate myself on as policies and stuff change. But it is a really good resource, especially because I think that the IEP is something that we should really be involved in, especially the creation of it. I think that, I mean, if students are going to be in our classroom, and we have to think about ways to implement their IEP and reach their goals, I think that it's important to be a part of the process of making the IEP, because That way we know exactly where we stand and what our students should be doing, and different ways we can help them. I think that's part of something you learn more about when making the IEP. So I definitely am an advocate for making IEPs, if you can for your students. Part of the IEP, I think I've talked about this a little bit, but I really like that there's a section. I'm trying to find it. I really like I can't remember the specific name for it, but the section that talks about the transition type of work you'll have to be doing with the student. I think that that's really important, and I know especially in secondary, that's a big thing that I plan on having a part in, and not just in students with disabilities, with all students. I plan on doing things in my classroom that are preparatory for either anything they do, making resumes for jobs or helping with college applications or essays. I really think that in order for students to understand the importance of what we do in class, they have to see how it relates to their world outside, what their future is, what they're going to be doing. That's something I've always felt is super important in the classroom, is to make that bridge between the outside world and the school world, and make it less so it's like school is completely different, we're not learning anything important. I think that by doing these things and showing that we really want to help them on their way to adulthood, and we really want to see what interests them and what specific things they want to do with their life in the classroom, I really think that's important. And so that part of the IEP struck me because that is something I want to do with the class, with all the students, but it also is something I really think would be really rewarding to work on with students with disabilities and talk about what they want to do with their lives, and make plans and help them achieve these goals. I think that's really something that I really like. Yeah, so let's see. What else did I say? Also, I wanted to talk about the importance of learning about evidence-based strategies in this class. I really thought that this was great because I hear that term being thrown around in the field a lot, evidence-based strategies, evidence. And I just hear it so much that I guess it sort of loses what it even means. Like, when I began to hear it, I just really thought any strategy was evidence-based, and that's not true at all. And so learning about different ones was really great, especially because I took lots of notes on them, so they're things that I can be doing in my class. Even in the couple lessons I've made this, I'm making a unit plan right now for another class. I'm using things like a gallery walk. I'm using a jigsaw method. I'm using think, pair, share method. And I'm trying to incorporate providing more opportunities to respond, and now I know that that is for everybody in the class, not just any opportunity to respond like I thought it was before. And just increasing the feedback, the direct feedback right after doing an activity. I think that that's something that I learned in this class, to really take, well, I would read a lot of things, I think, before this class, and for some reason I just wouldn't, I would read them and I would be like, oh, I'm going to use that in class, I'm going to use that in the future, but I would never write anything down or bookmark it or anything, and then I'd lose it, and then all that information would be gone. And this class, I mean, it's a sort of a side note, because it's sort of, I would say, part of the hidden curriculum of this class, is taking the resources, taking the ideas, and writing them down, and really trying to use them in the lesson so you don't forget them, and don't just say, oh yeah, I talked about that once, I never ended up using it. I think that, not that I'm claiming to know because I haven't been in the classroom, but I do think that good teachers are always thinking about the different resources they should be using, and strategies they could use that they know will help, and writing down things and keeping a track listing of those things. Like even a lot of my professors in class, if somebody says something like intriguing or something or talks about something, a tool they've used or something, even my professors I've noticed will be like, oh wait, can you say that again? I got to write it down so I remember so I can look into it later. And it's really cool because they're professors and they're still, you know, learning and taking students' advice on tools and things to use. Earlier in the Prezi, I made a video scribe, which is something I saw from my professor, Dr. Goss, last semester. He made one, and he didn't have us make one or anything. He made one just to present the lecture information the one time for my online class with him, and I realized a couple nights ago that it was something that it kept sticking in my head that I always wanted to try using it, and so I did. I made my little co-teaching reflection with it, and it was really cool to use something like a new software and see how information can be presented really visually. Now, it's only a 7-day free trial, so it's not something I can keep using unless I want to pay for it. But it was cool just to see. It reminds me of the new literacy tools that I want to be using in the classroom, and I think a lot of these new literacy tools will be great for students with disabilities because a lot of them I actually feel like are pretty easy to navigate, and it's really rewarding the types of things you can make with them. So I feel like there's also more internal incentive there. But I lost my train of thought a little bit. What was I talking about? Oh yes, evidence-based strategy. Yeah, so I really, learning about these strategies I think was really important because it sort of knocked it into my head that when I come across something that is evidence-based, does have research to support that it does work in the classroom, that's really important, and that's something that I should be thinking about how to use. How can I make it so? Because there is proven fact that this has been working, which in the education field with all the research I read, a lot of it is sometimes really proven facts about things that work can be far and few between. Some of it's just speculations. A lot of it they're still researching about. But when you find evidence-based strategies that do have research to support them, it is really cool. I tried to find more on my own. It was hard just by doing like a basic Google search. I just kept getting the topic, but not actual things to be using. But I think if I try a little harder and dig a little deeper, I will be able to find some more on my own. But yeah, so this was just to talk basically about some of my opinions on things and my takeaways. I know it was very broad and I didn't get into the real details, but I figured I did that a lot in my videos for my discussion boards, so I just sort of wanted to give an overview of some of my thoughts. Yeah, so that's that. Thanks for watching.